The cameras were already off when the moment began. Late afternoon heat pressed down on the set like a weight. The air above Kowloon carried the smell of seawater, electrical cables, and dust warmed by studio lights. Crew members moved slowly between equipment stands, their shirts darkened with sweat. Someone rolled a lighting cart toward the edge of the stage. Another man coiled a length of cable with the careful patience of someone who had done the same task hundreds of times before. Nothing about the moment suggested importance. The day had been long. Several fight scenes had been filmed. Bruises were appearing beneath makeup. Everyone expected the remaining hours to pass quietly until the evening break. Then a voice cut through the set. Not loud, not angry. Just clear enough that several nearby crew members turned at once. A stuntman stood a few feet away from Bruce Lee. His name was Raymond Chow. Not the producer whose name appeared on contracts and promotional material. This Raymond Chow lived somewhere much lower in the hierarchy of Hong Kong cinema. He belonged to the quiet workforce that built action scenes with their bodies and disappeared before the credits finished rolling. For 15 years, Raymond had done work that rarely received applause. He had fallen from balconies padded only by thin crash mats. He had taken punches meant for actors who needed their faces untouched. He had stepped into scenes where the camera required a body to absorb the violence of choreography. In that world, reputation was earned through endurance rather than attention. Raymond had built his reputation carefully. He was known for two things. First, he did not complain. Second, he did not believe in legends. By the summer of 1973, Bruce Lee had become something larger than the normal boundaries of film stardom. His presence on a set altered the atmosphere before he even spoke. Journalists described his speed in careful language that bordered on disbelief. Young martial artists watched his movements with the same focus monks reserved for sacred texts. Raymond had watched the same performances and drawn a different conclusion. He saw choreography. He saw editing. He saw a marketing phenomenon carefully assembled for audiences who had never stood in a real fight. The Hong Kong film industry of that era thrived on spectacle. Studios worked quickly, often with limited budgets and relentless schedules. The difference between cinematic combat and genuine violence could disappear beneath clever camera angles and disciplined stunt coordination. Raymond believed Bruce Lee was the most successful illusion the industry had ever produced. Nothing more. The city around them carried its own tension that summer. Hong Kong in 1973 lived between several worlds at once. British authority governed the territory officially, but the daily pulse of the streets followed different rules. Cargo ships arrived at crowded docks controlled quietly by triad organizations. Investors moved money through film productions that promised rapid profit if the right actor could capture international attention. Every major project balanced on fragile financial arrangements. Enter the Dragon represented something unprecedented, a Hong Kong star crossing into Western cinema with the weight of two industries watching. Bruce Lee was not merely the lead actor. He was the entire calculation. If he succeeded, the film would travel across oceans. If he failed, investors would remember the loss for years. No one on the set spoke openly about that pressure, but everyone understood it. The production revolved around one quiet principle: nothing must disturb Bruce Lee. The remark that Raymond Chow spoke violated that rule completely. You're nothing without the camera. He said it in the tone of a man offering an observation rather than an insult. For a moment the set lost its rhythm. An assistant director who had been reviewing the next scene stopped mid-sentence. A sound technician lowered a heavy microphone stand slowly to the floor without taking his eyes off the two men. A pair of extras near the edge of the stage shifted backward by instinct rather than decision. Bruce Lee turned his head. The movement was slow enough that several people later remembered it with unusual clarity. He looked directly at Raymond. Not with anger, not with surprise. He studied him the way a craftsman examines a tool he has never used before. Raymond did not move. His posture remained loose, almost casual. Years of stunt work had trained his body to remain calm in the presence of staged violence. He had stood inches away from explosions designed for dramatic effect. He had fallen through wooden tables meant to shatter under controlled impact. From his perspective, this moment was simply another demonstration waiting to happen. If Bruce Lee possessed genuine fighting ability, the truth would appear immediately. If he did not, the illusion would collapse in front of witnesses. Bruce Lee listened to the remark as if it required careful thought. Then he smiled. Several crew members later admitted that the smile unsettled them more than anger would have, because it carried no tension, no defensiveness, just quiet acknowledgement. He said nothing. The silence stretched long enough for people nearby to feel the change in atmosphere. It was not the silence of restraint, it was the silence of calculation. Bruce Lee stepped forward, only once. The step itself was unremarkable. There was no sudden aggression, no theatrical display meant for the benefit of observers. Yet that single movement altered the physical relationship between the two men completely. The space between them was no longer conversational distance. It was fighting distance. Raymond noticed it immediately. Years of stunt work had sharpened his instincts for positioning. His weight shifted slightly onto the balls of his feet, a natural preparation learned from countless rehearsed confrontations. Several crew members moved backward without realizing they had done so. No one spoke. The cameras remained off. In film productions, even heated arguments usually dissolve under the intervention of producers or directors. Someone makes a joke. Someone apologizes. Schedules reassert control. None of those familiar mechanisms appeared. Bruce Lee stood still. Raymond waited. The moment held for several seconds that felt longer than they were. Then Bruce Lee moved. Later accounts disagreed about the details. One lighting technician insisted he had seen Lee's shoulder shift first. Another crew member believed the movement had begun with a slight step that redirected Raymond's balance. Several witnesses claimed they had not seen the strike itself at all, only the result. Raymond Chow attempted to respond. His body began a motion that looked like the start of a defensive movement. His arms lifted slightly. His stance adjusted. Then everything stopped. The confrontation lasted less time than a spoken sentence. Raymond's body lost its structure as if some internal support had suddenly vanished. His knees folded without warning. His shoulders tilted forward. A hand reached instinctively toward his chest before failing to complete the gesture. He collapsed onto the studio floor with a sound that carried across the quiet set. Bruce Lee stepped back. The same calm control that had governed his earlier movement remained visible in every part of his posture. He did not look surprised. He did not appear satisfied. He simply returned to the place where he had been standing before the step. For several seconds no one approached Raymond, not because help was unwelcome, but because the witnesses could not quite understand what they had seen. The human mind searches for familiar patterns during conflict. Punches, shoves, visible impact. This moment contained none of those things in a way ordinary perception could easily interpret. Someone eventually moved forward and knelt beside Raymond. Another crew member called for assistance. Bruce Lee remained where he was, silent. The production resumed later that evening. Film schedules rarely allow for extended interruption. Equipment had been rented. Locations had been secured. Investors expected progress measured in completed scenes. The official explanation for Raymond Chow's disappearance from the set was simple: an injury, a departure from the project, nothing more. In the Hong Kong film industry of that era, such explanations rarely required further detail. Productions moved quickly. Replacements appeared. The machinery of filmmaking continued its quiet rotation, but the men who had witnessed the confrontation carried something else away with them. Not gossip, not fear, something closer to understanding. They had seen a moment when the boundary between performance and reality disappeared completely. Bruce Lee had never raised his voice. He had never argued. He had simply allowed a man to test a belief, and the result had arrived too quickly for ordinary eyes to follow. Long after Enter the Dragon finished filming, a few members of that crew would still remember the silence that followed Raymond Chow's remark. They remembered the smile. They remembered the step. And they remembered the realization that settled quietly over the set once the moment ended. Bruce Lee had never needed the camera. The camera had needed him.